get us kicked off tonight, I'd like to introduce to you the President of the Board of Commissioners, Christian Schnepp-Geiger.
All right. I wonder if this white light or red light's going to come on. Take me off stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out tonight. It's an honor and a privilege to be here to present the John C. Oliver Wildlife Conservation Lifetime Achievement Award. In the spirit of setting the stage for tonight, I did a little bit of pre-event polling. I asked some folks, I said, hey, what's the most controversial thing you can think of? So in no particular order, they came back: politics, religion, and deer management. So who knew deer management could stir up more debate than the last presidential election? This year's recipient, who's hiding behind the wall back here, Dr. Darial, not only knew that, but he navigated it with the finesse of a conservation maverick. Tonight we're here to honor him and his contributions to wildlife conservation, as they have been nothing short of legendary. This award recognizes an individual who throughout his career made substantial improvements to the wildlife and natural resources of Pennsylvania. Dr. Darial undeniably meets that criteria. From his groundbreaking research on black bears to spearheading the modernization of our deer program, his emphasis on science-based wildlife management has left a lasting impact on wildlife conservation efforts here in Pennsylvania. In launching his efforts to improve deer management, he took our story on the road. He ultimately traveled thousands of miles, talked to tens of thousands of people, and spoke within 25 miles of every Pennsylvania resident. Maybe not Sasquatch, that hasn't been confirmed. He did that often with great personal cost. You don't cover that kind of mileage on a biologist's salary and become rich out of it, I can promise you that. Thanks to his efforts, we now understand more about things like fawn survival, buck and doe movements, and we have a more balanced deer herd now than we've ever had before. Balancing the age structure of the deer herd has led to larger, older bucks on average, and we've added more records in our big game records book over the last 20 years than we have in any other 20-year period in our history. That's an outstanding byproduct of great science-based wildlife management. It's like he turned deer management into a blockbuster film and Pennsylvania became a destination deer hunter state. Even in retirement, Dr. Alt has not traded his passion for a rocking chair. He continues to spend his time inspiring the next generation through the Wildlife Leadership Academy. High school students are learning about hunting, wildlife, and conservation. Kind of like Wildlife 101, a course we probably all wish was included in mainstream education. So, as we present Dr. Darial with this award, we acknowledge not only his outstanding professional accomplishments, but also the inspiration that he has been within the conservation community here in Pennsylvania as well as across the country. He's crafted a legacy of resilience and foresight that continues to inspire and motivate us all. This award serves as a token of gratitude for a lifetime devoted to improving the natural world for both current and future generations. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Darial.
Thanks a lot for letting me write that. I feel uncomfortable getting in front of a crowd that isn't ready to throw something. So it feels strange because I've been gone for 20 years. And it's hard to believe. I feel like Rip Van Winkle. You just kind of wake up someday and say, God, that can't be possible. And then I look in the mirror every once in a while and go, yeah, I think it is possible. So that's why I don't have any mirrors in my house. But it's been a long time since I've spoken in front of a group. I mean, I left here in 2004. Probably don't know that story. But when I left, part of the reason why I left was that 6 months before that, I was leading a photo trip in the Spitsbergen, Svalbard area of Norwegian Arctic. It's about 600 miles from the North Pole. I lead photo tours all over the place ever since 1986. And so on that trip, when I was in the Arctic, I was the ship naturalist on a Russian ship. And I met a woman on the trip who was a doctor. She was the doctor on the ship. Where's this story going? So it was in November, so the rut was on. And no, it was in the summertime. And the rut was on. So what happened then, we started to date more and more. And let's see, like, do you want to bang your head against, 900,000 hunters, or do you want to have a nice time in California? I'm like, let me think about this a while. So I wound up going out there, and when I went out there, I met with her, and we got talking, and like, she comes from a family where they don't have guns. They're not really fond of guns or hunting, and her dad really started looking at her like, this guy's a hunter. And anyway, we got out there, and she heard me talking to my son, Garrick, and friends about hunting, and she comes over to me and says, hey, I'd like to try that. And I'm like, you have to know it too. We always say we're two dominant bears. You don't want to get into a fight because we'll kill each other. So she said, she liked the idea about the bears, but when she heard me talking about hunters and hunting, she said, I really like that. I'd like to do that. I said, well, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. It's not always, perfect. We try to make the best shots you can, but you can get into a situation where you wound one. It could get kind of ugly. You've got, people yelling and a deer squalling and bleeding. And she said, don't worry about it. She's a surgeon. She said, where I go to work, there's things bleeding all the time. It's not a problem. So then I brought her out, but when I took her out, she didn't want to just go get a deer. She wanted to learn how to hunt deer. Why do you go here instead of there? And how do you skin a deer? How do you gut a deer? How do you quarter it up and turn it into edible portions? And so I took her out, and she was only out 2 or 3 days, and she flattened one right off the bat. I couldn't get near the blood trail. It's like, get back. And she followed the blood trail, found it, dressed it out. The one thing she said that none of us ever said when we dressed our first deer, she said, it's a lot easier taking this stuff out than it is to have to put it back in and make it work. So anyway, they call her Dead-Eyed Delaney. Her name's Ann Delaney. Want to stand up, Ann? She's here now. And so then when we have meals there, she prepares venison in coastal California. Have some distinguished guests with us. And it's like, what are we having for dinner? Venison? Venison. Is that like deer, right? Yeah. It's like, where'd you get the deer? I killed it. And the amazing thing is that when she says things like that so candidly, people just say, oh, really? And then they have a piece, and it's like, wow, this stuff's really good. So if we're not careful, we're going to have more deer hunters from San Francisco than you have here in Pennsylvania. Anyway, I better get rolling here. So you want to know what time can do to your body? Just take a look. Look how much older I look back in 1974. So I was a grad student at Penn State when this photo was taken. Almost 50, it'll be 50 years from several months from now, from April 15th, 1974. Not a bit of difference. And so what I'd like to do this evening is to kind of run over, my career with the agency, thoughts I have about that, and thoughts about things that are happening more recently, and just kind of go down memory lane, but also talk a bit about natural resource management, especially wildlife management, as we move ahead here. want to talk about both the bear and the deer. So one of the things that I learned fairly quickly was that when you go out in you're associated. I was working as an undergrad or as a graduate student, and I was working for at Penn State, the Wildlife Research Unit, the same position that Dwayne has now at the Wildlife Research Unit at Penn State. He was my major professor that had that position, Dr. Jim Lindsay. And so I was doing bear research in the Poconos, northeast Pennsylvania, and up in Pike County, which is a little north and east of there, I started setting snares. And all of a sudden, the snares are sprung. I set a culvert trap, and it's sprung. And then it's gone. And it's in the edge of a pond. They tried to throw it into the pond or back it into the pond and leave it there. I'm like, why are they doing this? And so I started talking to locals. And they said, we don't like government people hanging out over here. We heard that you have these snares. We're afraid that they're going to catch our kids around the neck and sling them up into a tree. We hear you're killing the bears. We hear you're hauling them away. Government people never do anything good. It's always bad. I never was subjected to so much negative feedback, and it's like, geez, what's wrong? But I made some friends and started catching some bears in the area where they were. They knew quite a bit about bears. And this woman said to me, she said, let's have a meeting at the firehouse, and let's get all these people over there at that meeting. I want you to talk to them. Tell them what you're doing. And I'm really nervous. Like, wow, I'm not sure I want to get in a room with all these people. I thought, let's do it. So I went over. She baked up all these cookies and everything. I went over. I was all nervous and excited. My wife and my dad were there. And then about 10 minutes before showtime, there was 4 of us there, me, my dad, my wife, and the woman who cooked the cookies. And it's like, nobody's going to show up. And all of a sudden, the door opened, and they filled the place. Upstairs, it was like 70 people. And I was about ready to fall over. It's like, oh, my God, where do these people come from? There's not 70 people who live in Lord's Valley. They came from other places. And I started to talk to them. I had a snare mounted on a board. And I stuck my hand in it and pretended like it didn't hurt at all. The wenching didn't mind. It's just they're waiting to see a bloody stump waving around after I get done. And I said, you don't have to worry about this thing. This is the way it works. This is why we use them. I showed them pictures of bears and things that we were doing. But the thing I learned early on is that you have to get in the dirt with them on their land and talk to them. Now, you don't talk science and try and reach for the 5-syllable words. You just talk regular. Mainly because I don't know anything more than 3 syllables anyway. But I did the presentation, and when I got done, I said to them right off the bat, I said, listen, you guys know this property way better than I do. I'm not from this area. And I said, I desperately want to catch as many bears as I can. And if you can give me information that leads to the capture of a pregnant female bear, I will take you and your family into the den and I will photograph you with the bears. You never saw cooperation like that in all your life. They just came out of the woodwork. And the following year, I was taking people out. We had more and more people coming. Now, it didn't take long, and that just filtered all over the place. And that's how you can be one person all by yourself, and in a really short amount of time, you have this network going on. All of a sudden, you're not doing the work. Everybody else is. So I would go, to the Caymans for a few weeks and see how the quota was while I was gone. But it was really rewarding for me. I enjoyed making friends in new areas, but I really enjoyed catching more and more bears. And we started to catch, enormous numbers of bears in areas where it was kind of hard to catch because there weren't many bears then like there is now. And all my life, as long as I was working on the bear project, 25 years, including my graduate work, I always had groups like this. And this is at a den site. And we learned a lot about bears, and we built a lot of support from the general public. And when you go to change policies in an area, an arena where there's a lot of pressure on commissioners or against, towards legislators about what the Game Commission is doing, when you build an army of supporters, that's how you win. It's a win-win situation. It doesn't become so such a hard thing for the commissioners to do. Legislators are better off supporting you than opposing you. And we get done what we need to get done. So the one thing that we needed more than anything else was radio collars. When I started working on bears, radio telemetry was just getting going. Anesthesia for large mammals like bears was just getting going. And we knew very little about bears in general. And so it was the most exciting days of my life. You could hardly sleep at night. You'd have radios on and you'd be out there with the signals, seeing if you can see them, run in and see if they poop. Oh, what did you eat this time? And so you're just, every day you're learning new stuff. It was extremely exciting, and always was. And you can talk to Mark Turnett, who's sitting right here. I ran that bear program for 25 years, and he ran it for like 21 after that. We had 45 years between the two of us, and we still look like teenagers. But I wanted radio transmitters, and I was still doing lectures all over the place. And so I'm doing these lectures, and I bring a little cardboard box with a slit in it and said, you know, donations for a bear collar. I want to buy a bear collar. I want to talk to you tonight about scale. You need to think, if you want to be successful, you need to think on a bigger scale than $1. Give $1. So when out I was giving these lectures, and I would get 25 cents, 50 cents, you know, you come back, wow, I made $6 today. That's pretty good. When you saw where it came from, it might have been a significant part of their annual salary. But one night I gave a presentation to a group about this size. I had my little can up there. And everybody's, you know, just wearing Carhartt and camo. And this guy's back there with this nice suit on. It's like, wonder who he is. He waits, he comes on down, and he walks up to me, and 10 times during that lecture I said, if we could just get radio collars, we could learn so much about bears. That is the limiting factor that's preventing us from launching a major study to learn a lot of stuff about bears. About every 10 minutes I said that. And so at the end of the night, this guy comes walking up to me. I see him coming all the way from the back. I'm like, you know, it's like my alarms are going off. You know, here comes money. You got a little money coming here. We might get $2 here. So I'm standing there, and he comes walking up to me, and he said to me, if you could, so what's the one thing you would want to have more than anything else? I'm like, uh-oh, forget this question. What's the next one going to be? The next one's going to be, how many do you want? I'm like, I was born and raised on a farm where we didn't even have a bathroom until I was 8 years old. We had an outhouse. So when I think about money, the kind of money it would cost to buy a lot of collars, it's like buying a house. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm talking to myself really fast. I know this guy's I'll make me an offer. I can see it coming before he even talks. And I'm like, do you have enough courage to tell this guy, you know, I want 10 collars or something? I'm sitting there rolling that back and forth in my head. He comes up to me. First question was, what do you need? I knew then. I said, you know, radio transmitters is what we need money of. And he said, if you could have all the transmitters you'd ever want. I was like, oh my God. And I turned around and vomited on the floor. And he just looked at me and said, you know, how many would you need if you had all you'd ever need? And I'm like, oh my God, am I quivering? And I said, we could use 500. It's only 100,000 or so. And he said, he put his hand out, he shook my hand, and he says, I'm so-and-so, I'm Vice President of Western Electric Corporation. And my knees are going like this. And he said, we have an environmental organization in Western Electric. It's called the Pioneers. It's kind of like Boy Scouts, but it's an environmental version through Western Electric. He said, we teach them electronics, but we also are involved in conservation activities. Would you be willing to take some of these kids out on a field trip sometime, and we'd have TV with you and still photography, and we're going to use it for advertising for Western Electric? So would you? I said, I do this all the time. Sure, I'd be glad to take them out. And he said, about those transmitters, he says, we will give you 500 radio transmitters. And I just hit the deck like, oh my God. And so he said, we'll have our environmental students build them themselves. And then that's part of, you know, for them, that's exactly what they want to do, is teach the kids electronics, and win-win all the way around. And he said, then we can get them out and we can promote this for the business as well. They built 500 transmitters, and it put us on the map to be one of the largest bear studies in North America at the time. How did it happen? By carrying a little cardboard box and going along with the guy, letting him give me a fortune. But that changed everything. My dad is a pilot, and we flew a Super Cub. And there's the guy who flies that same Super Cub right now, sitting right over here, Jeff Wallace. Yep. And so the vehicles, or the plane is still flying, but we flew several thousand hours radio tracking bears over a 20-year period with that. That's all you know. Once you go out with the plane, you go down the ground, go walking around, track your way into a bear den, crawl down in. All of us have crawled into a lot of dens, and it's not really dangerous. If it was dangerous, I'd be dead. Mark Trinetta would be dead. None of us have. Unfortunately, we can't even show a scar. I don't have a scar. I never even got a scratch hardly from one. Got them, I've had them standing on me and stuff like that, but they have no interest in hurting you at all. Crawl down inside of there, get a hold of them, gather them up. Of course, bring them out, tag them, and collect data on them. When we started, when you look at the literature, what do cubs look like at birth? What are the characteristics of cubs at birth? And there was only a couple animals that were ever weighed and measured and really examined, even in captivity. None in the wild, zero, at birth. So I had so many radio-collared females, we started going out every single day looking at their dens and listening for 10 minutes for the sound of the cubs. As soon as we heard them, we'd go in, anesthetize the mother, pull them out, weigh them, measure them, take all kinds of measurements. We wrote an article in the Journal of Mammalogy talking about it. This is what they look like at birth. Their eyes don't open until about, I forget, it's like 42 days or so in age. They have earbuds instead of ears. They can't hear, they can't see, and they can't smell. And so you can imagine, can't see, smell, or hear. They're down in the den with their mother. We noticed, though, by putting a warm object next to them, they'll migrate toward a warm object. When you scan the mother bear's body, one of the hottest places on that body is the nipples. And that helps them, it may be helping them find a nipple. This is what they look like. The umbilical cord falls off usually on the third day of life. You better learn that. It's very important. You'll never need to know it again for as long as you live. But look at how well developed these claws are. We weighed them, measured them, and they come back like 8 years later, and here you go. This is a picture of my son who's sitting right here when he was a lot younger. And this bear, I was trying to dart it because I wanted to be a he-man. It's a 683-pound bear in the summertime. This guy'd be in 800s in the fall for sure. And, of course, it didn't go around where I was. It went around my son got it. So we went through a ceremony and collared it and so on, and did what we normally do. In terms of looking at the size of bears, we are on the high end. There aren't many states that have bigger bears than us. And so they're breeding at younger ages, having larger litters. These are things we learned in the early years of bear research. The heavier the mother, the larger the litter. And we have the largest litters of bears of any species anywhere in the world here, at least when I was doing research on that. In the early years, I was getting called out to remove bears from trees in cities, and I hadn't had the time to grow a brain yet. So I would go out and do it. I'd climb the trees, dart them, run up, try and get to them before they fell. I never lost a bear. I did have one fall from 40 feet. I shot it with a dart. It must have got accidentally an intravenous injection. Within 45 seconds, it just falls about 35 feet, hits an agway storage shed, and turned it inside out. Just the whole roof collapsed, went in, which would prevented the bear from dying if it would have hit the ground that hard under that position. And then the guy wanted to sue the state, and I came over and built a wooden shed to replace that agway storage shed. We all get involved in some weird situations. One of the ones I got involved in was at the bear check stations. We had these picketers came in, or people from the anti-hunting organization. they came in from all over the country, and they came to make sure that the bear hunters of Pennsylvania would not get bears because they were going to chase them away. Right. And so this is in the parking lot of State Game Lands 180 in Pike County, northeast Pennsylvania. And here they are. They show up in the middle of the day, put all their signs out. Like 5 TV cameras show up. And I'm listening to them, and they're talking about, well, bear hunters aren't doing well today because we're chasing the bears away from them. And I'm like, what on earth is this? So I'm listening to it, and it's just the most absurd thing you ever heard. And so I know in one case in Promised Land where they tried to harass them, they led them way back in and took off running, and they were lost back there for quite a while. While they were on the other side of the swamp, while they put a drive on for them, you know. Anyway, here they are. They show up in the middle of the day with all these TV cameras. When you hear them talking, they're like, we saved the bears because we scared the bears away from the hunters. And I'm like, how stupid is that? And so I went over, and I was watching. They said, oh, you're the bear biologist, right? I said, yeah, I'm the bear biologist. And he says, well, these guys have really saved a lot of bears today. Do you have a comment? I said, yeah, I do. And he said, what's your comment? I said, my comment is, I said, it's 2 o'clock. Because they looked at the statistics from last year compared to this year, and there was like, 300 less bears killed this time than they said, well, we saved 300 bears. Like, are you kidding? And so that's what they're saying. The guy holds his microphone, sticks it in my face, and says, is that true? I said, oh, do you have a comment on this? I said, yeah, I do. I said, let's just think about this for a minute. I said, Pennsylvania is 45,000 square miles in size. And I said, looked at my watch, and I said, 6 hours ago, bear season started. And I said, so we have the data in from the 6 hours later. It was already, whatever came to the check stations they knew about it was. I said, as far as the number, and I said, okay, that's over 45,000 square miles. At that time, we have 3,000 bears or whatever it was. And I said, and we have 18 people standing here. And I said, they have no impact. I said, they were here most of the time. And I said, I've been here during bear season every year for the last 10 years. I've never seen a bear come through this parking lot during bear season. Yeah. So I said, the answer to your question is, these people have not altered the life or death of even a single bear. Thank you. Turn on the news. These anti-hunters were out today, and they saved 500 bears. And I'm like, God, give me a break. But these people know how to do it. And so we can roll our eyes and be angry about it, but if you want to make a difference in conservation, you better understand how this works. And you don't have to play their games, but you need to understand what they're doing and try and do it legitimately. If you're doing a research project, bring them with you. And you'll own it then. You go, oh my God, it was a thrilling adventure. And then you get more and more support. Why is that important? Because someday when you grow up as a biologist, you're going to come in with your heart wide open saying, good God, I hope we could change this policy because it needs to be changed. And I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to change it when you've got hundreds of thousands of people out there that have either seen you in a lecture or been out with you in the woods. I took over 12,000 people into bear dens. I kept track of it. Into bear dens. We're 12,000 people over a 25-year period. And God knows how many people have come out on the trap line. And those people show up in the strangest way. Last week, Sarah Muller, yes, executive director of the National, I'm thinking name, the Wildlife Leadership Academy, got an email. Somebody said, do you know Gary Alt's address? Yeah. And so she calls me, she sends me a text, and I have this guy wrote, he wants to talk to him. He wants to write me. So I gave the guy my address. He's from Switzerland. It's like, what the heck is this? And he writes a letter back that would bring a tear to your eye. This guy, I have seen this so many times in the last 50 years. You just do this, people are gone and you never see them again. 47 years later, he writes a letter to me. He said, you don't know me, but I know you. He said, I was 17 years old. He sent me a picture of him on the trip when he was 17 years old. So 57 years ago or whatever, 47 years ago. And he recited exactly what happened. I remember the bear he's talking about. It was near my home. And he said, my mom died the week before. And he said, we were devastated. I was 17 years old. And my dad said, I know a guy who will take us to show bears. Would you like to do it? We did it. With him, his dad, and his uncle. And he said that they, for their whole lives, always talked about that adventure. They have photos of it. He has a recording of he recorded the conversations when we were talking and stuff like that. It's amazing how much impact just taking them out, not, to get paid for it, but to share with them what was shared with me. How did I get into bear research? There was a graduate student named George Matula. Dave Putnam we were grad students together. Yes. George Matula was there at the same time. Really nice guy. I was in the Poconos, northeast Pennsylvania. He was flying a little plane to radio track bears. He ran into my dad at the airport. And my dad said, oh, my son is going to school at Utah State University for wildlife management. And George says, hey, I'd like to meet him. So I come over to meet him, and to me, it was like God. It was the first time in my life I had one look at George Matula and said, that's what I want to be when I grow up. And George was the nicest guy you could ever see. I was with him for 2 weeks. He was letting me, shouldn't tell you this, he was letting me do anesthesia. He let me set snares, set culvert traps, do radio telemetry. It was like the greatest adventure of my life. It changed my life. That's why I want the bears. I want to work with bears. And so George is the one who kept in touch, and then he hooked me in with Dr. Lindsay at Penn State. That's how I wound up going to school for my master's degree on doing that. So it changed my life. And I've all my life tried to take people out who, whether I know them or not, but usually I don't. But over time, those people will be an aid for you and whatever it is you believe in for the rest of your life. We learned a lot about the kinds of places where bears den, whether it be in rock cavities or trees blow over. Yeah, we learned that about 20% of all the cubs in Pennsylvania drowned in these excavation dens. They flood, the mother lays right there, the water goes up, and they drown, and she walks out. They den in hollow trees like this, which was a particular challenge. I'm in the top of the tree, but it's hollow all the way to the ground. Down at the bottom, there's the bear. I fired a dart, there's the collar, shoot the shoulder, put on a harness, and someone, usually a friend, lowers you down in. It's really frustrating when they throw the rope in later and start negotiating about their salary. Here's a case where 3 times in 10 years, different bears, related though, denned in this rock cavity right near that house. The people in the house had no idea. They just don't go outside. They're New York City people, and they come there for weekends and stuff. They just never notice. Here's one where the guy did notice. So I come there on Wednesdays, usually in the middle of the week, because they're not there. They're down in the city. It's like I had a radio signal coming out from underneath his porch. So I walk over, and I'm looking in the hole and shine the light. There's a mother and 3 cubs in the back. Here he comes. I was walking around, and I thought, oh, God. It's like come out with a double-barrel shotgun or something. And he walks down, and he looks at me and says, yeah, I've been looking at that. He said, what do you think did that? Woodchuck? And I'm like, no, I don't think it's a woodchuck. He says, what do you think it is? I said, here's a light. Have a look. He shined that light in there, and he just started jerking and twitching like he had a major disease, handed me the light and took off and ran in the house. And out comes his wife. And she says, hey, what's going on? And I said, you got a bear in your house. And she's like this. And then I gave her the light. She shined the light in there. She said, who are you? And I said, I'm from the state. I'm here to help. So she looked at me and she walked over and she said, get your bear out of my yard. And I'm like, okay. I don't want to do it. If I haul them, the cubs might die. They might not, but she might leave them and then you have to adopt them. It's crazy. Why are we moving it? It's like the 15th of March. They're going to leave within 2 weeks. They aren't going to do any more damage. But, if you're an employee from the government, and you try to negotiate with it, forget it. You're not going anywhere. Yes, ma'am. I'll take it out right away. I said that. And so I went back to the car, got the drugs, came back. I said, you can watch. You can stand right here and watch. I'll show you. Shoot the mother, pull her out. There's the cubs. Hand one of the cubs to the lady, and let her hold it. Keep it warm. It's cold out. Open up, puts it in there, watching. Hey, how big do they get? How old are they? How big an area do they use? And the husband says, how many people do they kill each year? I said, none. And so he's really disappointed. He says, don't they at least kill kids or something? I said, no, they don't. And so then I have a plan, because after 10 minutes, they don't want to let go. So I'm going around. I said, listen, I have to take them out of here in 30 minutes. So keep asking me questions. I process the bear, you know, it's anesthetized, tag it, weigh it, measure it, tattoo it. And I go over to the lady, and I go like this, and I say, give me the cup. And she's like, it's like I'm a pervert or something, you know. She's like, this is my cup. And I said, I got to haul it away. She's like, what's going to happen if you haul them away? I said, they could die. And she's like, oh my God. I said, they might live, but I said, if she abandons them in a cold night or whatever, I said, you could lose them. And she's like, well, she was heart-struck. And she's like, what if we put them back under the house? Bingo, that's where they want to go. I wouldn't have thought of that. And she's like, but she doesn't say that. She said, what could we put them under the house? And she's like, I said, yeah, that'd be fine. She goes, put them under my house. Yes, ma'am. I put them back under there, and that's the way it worked out. Okay, here's just another interview at the check station. I'm not going to go into that too much. In this case, I'm not getting into it too much. Court case, Arizona. Girl Scouts sleeping in this tent. One of them washed their hair with like strawberry shampoo. A bear came in, mauled her, consumed approximately 8 pounds of flesh off her body, and she survived. So the back of her thighs, her butt, and wealthy family's daughter. So they have a court case against the state of Arizona. Why? Because the state of Arizona caught that bear 7 days before. The only thing it was doing was getting into a garbage. Nobody on the planet could ever know that was the problem. They have a very good bear policy. If it was charging, they would have killed it. Tripping over a garbage can that's full of garbage out in the yard, let's just keep your garbage someplace where they can't get it. So that's what they did. They hauled the bear 10 miles away, and on the way home, this happened. We go to court. They bring me in as an expert witness on bears. And so, you know, my comment is, they can't, no person on the planet would know this was going to happen. Only once or twice a year in all of North America it happens. You don't know when or where it's going to happen. It's just like lightning. Anyway, the attorneys argued that if he hadn't hauled the bear away, it wouldn't have been there and this wouldn't have happened. And I said, you know, that's a little bit like, when I had my chance to talk in front of the judge, I said, it's like I am a police officer and he is speeding 70 miles an hour in a 65 zone. I pull him over and I give him a ticket. I let him go. And a week from now, he kills someone. And you say, if you'd have put him in jail, this never would have happened. That's true. But why would I put him in jail? Why would we have killed this bear? We had no reason to kill it. There's no, you know, you could go through tens of thousands of bears and never have this happen again. But when it went to court, the jurors didn't ask whether it should do it or not. It was like, can we demand more payments to the people? Reason I'm going through this with you is because what are we looking at here? We're watching how people who have strong opinions can twist that in a way that it defies facts. They get paid millions of dollars, and all over the United States, wildlife departments are really nervous about playing multi-million-dollar lawsuits about a bear that did something after you put tags on it somewhere. Anyway, I got to get rolling. So we learned how to adopt orphan cubs. That's one of the things that happened. This has gone on all over North America. People have done this. We learned how to adopt orphans. Just put them in the den, and they will raise them. But if you find them outside after the denning season, and the mother trees her cubs like this, like the real cubs are, or the litter is on the top, this is an orphan, and Some of you might recognize Danny Jones here. He worked with us a lot over the years. But we treed the orphan up with the other cubs. Mother comes in, calls them down, grunting. They come all down. She'll smell the orphan. She'll kill it. Almost every time. And about half of them will eat it. And so we thought there's good mothers and bad mothers. But in actuality, we went back and scientifically went out and we took 7 mother bears and gave them a cub during the denning season. None of them killed it. Every one of them killed the second cub when you gave it to them after the denning season. And so you learn what you can and can't do, what works and what doesn't work. That's science. That's research. That's why we have a profession of wildlife management. And our purpose inside an agency is to gather that scientific information, be able to present it to the Board of Commissioners, or whoever's going to make the decision, works its way up through internally. We debate and talk and make sure that we have good data. Those recommendations are given in a room like this. We have the Board of Commissioners in here. And that, I think, my recurring thing here tonight is that when we go through making policy, when we make decisions on our natural resources, it's hard. When we decide to do something, you cannot make substantive changes without making a lot of people upset. You're not going to do it. If you want to get a job done, then do research and find out identify the problem, do the research, and say, we think we have the answers. We feel really comfortable. This is the thing to do. Then just line up and go after it. Go for it. You will feel better. Your employees will feel better. And the resource will be better. And the agency will have a better reputation. And all my life, we've done those kind of things. It wasn't fun, but it was really rewarding when the results came out and we were able to actually change something that we knew was wrong. And when you do that, there's a piece of you is never the same again. You grow and you meet other people, even in the same agency, that start saying, hey, that was a pretty neat thing that you did. And it makes you feel good about your career, but most of all, it's what you're doing for the resource. That's why we're here. That's the purpose of this agency. So we said, well, okay, if they kill them later by smelling them, what do? Rub Vicks all over them and they'll raise whatever you give them. They'd probably raise a spaniel if you gave it to them. Here's Danny and I in the Southwest Regional Office working on some bears, and this is typical. Whenever there was a large gathering, we'd grab a bear and bring it in, and we're doing our little show and tell there. And again, there's just tens of thousands of people who came to those things. You make an ally for life. A lot of those people, they still have photos of it from 47 years ago. We were able to take a lot of people. Some of them were not only nice people, but they had a lot of influence. This is Tom Ridge here. And Tom Ridge I really liked the man personally. I took him out with bears at least 6 times, him and his wife and kids. He was a guy who would talk with you, and he'd come back to you 6 months later when you talked to him, and he'd pick up, he still remembered what he said to you. That meant a lot to me. I had and we'd just go for a walk in the woods sometimes. I just liked the guy. Because he wasn't talking about Tom Ridge, he's talking about, what do you do for the state? What could I do for you? He's the guy who helped us change antler restrictions. If it wasn't for Tom Ridge, there wouldn't be antler restrictions. If it wasn't for half the people in this audience, there wouldn't have been antler restrictions. I get the credit for it, but I was just one person on the team. Chris Rosenberry's here in the audience. He duked it out. I mean, we used to get in. We were allowed, because of Tom Ridge, that's how I switched from bear to deer. Because he wanted, why was he so interested in solving the deer problem? Because he's the governor of Pennsylvania, and green forest certification for the Green Forest Program was going to be stripped from DCNR on his watch. So now you have the governor of Pennsylvania saying, not on my watch. Good. I like this a lot. So then the executive director comes to me and says, how would you like to be on the deer project? No, I don't think I do. I don't. If you read the history of deer management in Pennsylvania, you're not going to live long. It's not going to kill you, but it's going to kill your career. And so, He was like, what? What are you talking about? That's insane. Yes, it is insane, but it's true. If you go back over the history in the last 100 years, you see this. And so we went back and forth and negotiated. He couldn't pay me enough to take the job. I don't want to run deer management. I never did. I want to fix deer management. And I want to let somebody else run it after it's fixed. And so I negotiated to have a lot more control than usual and have political immunity. I don't want to be killed by the legislators. I want to have some blocking. Let me pick my own team. I'm going to pick people who would live and die by doing the right thing for the resource, for nothing else. Get the right people in a room, and the first year you go through for seasons of bag limits, it's like Dwayne Diefenbach is here. He's one of the best academics I ever met in my life. I wish I had an IQ at least half as high as his, but he's a nice guy too. And he really knows a lot about a lot of different things. I want him on the team. He cares. He wants to do the right thing. But Brett Wallingford, Chris Rosenberry, Brian Schisler, who was a forester, was involved in this forest certification program. So we're trying to get the right people in the room to figure out. All these guys knew more about deer than I did. But it doesn't matter. I was running the program. You can pour all your minds together, even Dwayne's giant brain, and then I look smart. So we met, and what did we say? We said, we want to there's two things we have to do. We have to drop the total deer population significantly lower so that the forest can recover. And we want to do something about being the worst example in the United States about killing off our bucks before they grow up. We were the worst example in the United States. It was my job to make West Virginia the worst in the United States. And so we set out to do that, and we went out and we said, well, you know, how could we get antler restrictions to work? We didn't even want antler restrictions. None of us wanted antler restrictions. You know, there's any number of ways you can do it. It's been done before. No buck hunting. Yeah, right. Tell you what, I'll be in California and I'll supervise it from Japan. Because the bomb's going to go off. You have to have a brain. You have to say, that's just plain suicide. They won't do it. Okay, well, what about Ernebuck? Ernebuck, they do it in Wisconsin. They're not crazy. And New Jersey does it. Ernebuck means you have to shoot a doe first, and then you have to bring it into a check station. Then you get a permit to shoot a buck. Could you imagine that happening in Pennsylvania? It's like my granddaddy bought a license, and we got it. My daddy got one. I got it. And guess what? I'm going to keep getting it, or your life's going to be bad. So you have to know when you're meeting with a team and saying, okay, what are the options? Earn a buck. Forget it. We don't have check stations. This isn't going to work politically, that's for sure. Okay. What about no buck hunting? We did it twice in Pennsylvania, I think, over the years. And both times the people who did it got fired. It's like, I personally felt like, that's a bad idea. And so then we said, what else do we have? Antler restrictions. How does that work? Well, you have to have some minimum size. We already have one. If it has 3-inch antler, you know, a real trophy. And I always said when I gave lectures, I would hold one up, a Y. We measured tens of thousands of bucks for antler restrictions to answer the question, if you want to save 50% of the yearling bucks, how big a buck, what kind of a restriction do you have to have? 1.3 inches doesn't save much. A Y buck saves some, but it doesn't save, maybe 20%, depends on the area. But when you go to 3 points on a side over most of Pennsylvania, you will save more than 50% of all the yearlings in those areas. There's like 5 or 6 counties up against Ohio and the west out there where you have to go to 4 points. You have to have at least 4 points on a side or 3 on top. So what they have, because you can't see the brow points so well. Just from a logistical standpoint, that's fine. But that's what we did. The chairman of the Fish and Game Committee was breathing fire down my throat saying, do it. Do it now. Antler restrictions now. I want to do it. Good. Have some patience. I don't want to do it until we know what we're doing. We don't even know what kind of restriction we'll have. So let us take this 1 year and gather data on tens of thousands of bucks. We'll know next year how big do these bucks grow and what percent of them will be saved if we set a... It's using science. I know nothing about this. Dwayne taught me this a long time ago. And so you say, okay, if we do this and the hunters pay attention and they do that, it'll work. So then you have public meetings. You get 1,000 people in an auditorium. And you talk about antler restrictions. And they say, they'll walk up to the microphone at the end of the lecture and say, I'm going to shoot first and count points later. And I said, what do you do when a Brinks truck pulls up to a bank? Because he said, I can't control myself. I said, really? He said, there's a place for you, sir. It's called jail. And 1,000 people are roaring, and he goes out the door. And I always hoped that he wouldn't be at my car when I came out later. But I use that as an example because there's a lot that went on about those public meetings that you probably don't know about. That was very measured, very measured. We, as an agency, have been held captive for decades by a tiny fraction of our constituents. These are people who they don't want to do anything. They talk about the good old days, but you go back to the good old days and start leafing through the literature, and they're saying the same stupid things no matter what the policy is. You know where you beat them? You beat them in front of 1,000 people. You have a small meeting, 30 people show up, 15 of them are, these guys. It's like, wow, we got a lot of resistance here. Drop those 15 guys into 1,000, and they don't look so tough anymore. And the name of the game is, I don't know how many of you went to the lectures that I gave. I did 223 lectures to over 100,000 people, and that wasn't by mistake. There was a lot of things going on there you probably don't realize. I'm a bear biologist, and I was appointed to run a deer program. What do you think the hunters say? That's stupid. He doesn't know anything about deer. How many years have you been hunting? 45? Oh, I've been hunting for 50. Let me tell you how it is. You got to understand the animal you're working with. And so you have to think about how it is. And if you're going to change the policy, then set up the stage where you're going to fight. If you're in the Civil War, I want the high ground. And with this, you go around and you do the literature. Dwayne, the other member, says yes, antler restrictions. If they'll not shoot them, this is a way to let bucks at least have more bucks get through. Okay, let's do it. Get 1,000 people in there, and they start asking questions, or giving me comments like I'll shoot first and count later. Go ahead. I love it when you do that because they're gone. The audience will boo them right out of the room. And so that's the thing. Think in your head, what can I say that sets them up? Like, for example, this. I knew we had people who were like professionals. They would go all over the state to take meetings out of order. I watched them do it. When I was a biologist working on bears, and the deer biologists were lined up here, and they were throwing raunchy terminology at them all night long, and they were not allowed to defend themselves. That's not right. I sat in the audience, and I couldn't even hold myself. I would never stand there. I don't care who said what. That shouldn't happen. When you let your employees be treated like that, you lose everything. They have no respect for you. They have no respect for the agency. Who are we? What are we responsible for? You're going to let these people do that? That's not right. That's why I took deer management. Because I saw that. And I read the history of deer management. And some very good people lost their careers trying to do the right thing on deer management. So a lot of things I'm not good at, but I know how to handle an audience. I said, let me handle that part of it. And I'm not worried about it. Well, that's not true. I was worried. I'm not worried now because it's over. But in my heart of hearts, it's like our agency for 100 years under-harvested does. Why did they do it? It's not like the board wasn't good people. It's not even like the hunters were bad people. It's the circumstance. And I don't think, and the other thing is when for 100 years the agency gets beat into the ground because these people come out and fight, doesn't mean we can't win. Let's change the rules. Let's go to the high ground. And I will talk to these people. Give me 1 hour. Give me an hour with them. You think I walk up to that microphone and start talking about antler restrictions in the first, forget it. And you don't want to go up there and start using 5-syllable words. You don't want to act cocky. Yeah, I work for the government. I have an associate degree, a BS, an MS, a PhD. I don't know if you're going to understand it, but I'll try to explain it to you. They're going to take you out of there in a pine box. So you come up to the microphone and you just stand there and you look out, and the place is packed. And a lot of times, the largest crowds ever assembled in these small towns were jammed. They couldn't even fit them all in. You walk up to the microphone like this, and you look around, and then you just look down. You don't do anything. And it's like, dead quiet. It's like, is he catatonic? Is he going to die? What's going on? And then you just look up at him and say, I wish I could tell you what you want to hear, but I can't. I'm going to tell you what I think is the truth. Just because I say it's the truth doesn't mean it is the truth. The greatest days of my life have been with my father, my grandfather, and my son have been spent deer hunting. If you think I am interested in destroying deer hunting in this state, you are crazy. I would do anything to fix this problem. And it starts to go through. They may not believe you right away, but at least they start listening. And then you start talking about deer, not about the issue, about deer. Not white-tailed deer in Pennsylvania, about deer of the world, because I'm a bear biologist. And so, there's 42 species of deer in the world. Did you ever wonder why deer have antlers? No, I never have. And it's like, well, clue about why they have them is you look at what species don't have antlers. How are they different? And then I went down to Washington, D.C., Museum of Natural History. I filmed a Chinese water buck skull. No antlers. Canines are like 4 inches long, and the animal's 18 inches tall. That's a lot of tooth. And when you get the lighting up, I'm a professional photographer. I'm playing with this thing, getting it just the way I wanted. Perfect lighting, purple background, nice little flash, just enough to make it look perfect. And then that hits the screen. And I'll say, this is what happens when a deer doesn't have antlers. What does that stupid picture of a skull from Washington, D.C. have to do with antler restrictions in Pennsylvania? Everything. Because what happens? They're looking at this going, oh my God, what do you see in the audience? You're just scanning the audience. You'll see this. They're like looking at each other going, wow, did you know that? No, I didn't. But then I'll say, could you imagine if moose didn't have antlers? They'd have 3-foot daggers coming out of their mouth, and I said, we'd send 18 of you bow hunters after them, only 2 of you make it back to the car alive. And that's what happens. But you get 1,000 people laughing like that, and the people who came there to take you out sit down in their chairs, and they go into metabolic depression because they want to fight, but it's hard to fight a guy who makes the audience laugh a lot. And then you can't just win it with jokes. You got to swing around and get to the point of things. Don't go after the real prize until you own them after an hour. You hold the audience in the palm of your hand and then say, let's go for it. So now you go in and say, at that point, who sponsors the meeting? You're the Pennsylvania Game Commission. We have 100 years of being toasted a lot by legislators. Legislators are fine people. But they don't have to worry about managing the resources of Pennsylvania. They're interested in opinions. Opinions. My people say the Game Commission's horrible. Really? So then I'm going to vote against it. Or I'm not going to give them a license increase until you don't shoot less does. This has gone on for 100 years. Why do they do it? They do it because they got away with it. And it gets harder and harder to change that behavior once in there. But it can be done. It can be done. But it's not done easily. What do? I met with the press secretary upstairs, really great guy, who knew a lot about how that works. And I sat down with him, closed the door, and I said, who are the 10 most aggressive legislators who hurt us from doing our mission? And where do they live? What county are they in? And I said, I'm going to do 70 lectures, and I'm going to get every one of them. I'm going to go in their districts. They will sponsor it. They could hate the game commission. It doesn't matter. If you're in their district and you draw 1,000 people, they want to be in charge. Why don't you sponsor it? Oh, yeah, I'd like that. Good. We're betting the farm. What are we betting? We're betting that I can get those people to raise their hands and say they will support this program. Got 1,000 people out there. And I would tell him. He would introduce me, and I would say, you know, sit in the front row. And when I'm done talking, and you just turn around, you stand up, and you watch your constituents. I don't know what they'll do, but I'm going to ask the question. Look for yourself. And you ask the question at the end of the presentation, after you've made them laugh, you've told them all this stuff, and they really think, hey, this is a good idea. You say, how many people in the room tonight would be willing to raise their hand? Or, how many people tonight feel like you'd let us do our job, let us make these changes that I recommended? If you think you would agree that we should be allowed to do this, raise your hand. 850 people raise their hand, and the game is over. That person is gone. So the people who are disrupting our organization for 100 years go to that legislator and say, I don't like what you're doing. This is no good. You know, we don't like it. Lots of people don't like it. What does he say or she say? I was in a room with 1,000 people 2 weeks ago. 850 of them raised their hand. I understand that you are not supporting it. Overwhelmingly, my people support it. That's how you win. You don't play by wildlife management. You play the same game they're playing. Only you're forming the opinions of those people, and when you get that kind of power, you can neutralize that. And so the Board of Commissioners sitting here to make a decision doesn't have to worry about getting, 1,000 crazy people to come in here talking about Mars or something. Just nutsy stuff. And then you get a lot of people coming in saying, do it, do it, do it. That's how you do it. That's how, I think, as an agency, I wouldn't live forever, but there are other people out there who can do that. And I'm telling you that if you can find those people and you want to keep them, give them a job and let them do it. Just let them do it. Get the right team together, and it will make everybody look better. That's what we need to be doing for our resource, and stop having the people who know very little about it use their opinion to turn the legislators against us or large numbers of people against us. I out of time? What time? I didn't even see. Huh? All right. That's okay for you, but so over the years, we've had some very interesting people. Here I'm with David Attenborough from the BBC. What an amazing guy. I spent a whole day with him alone, and he was more impressive in life than he is on TV. It was just an honor to spend a day with him. He was funny, told me how he got up the ladder and where he's at. It's a really funny story. Anyway, here National Geographic did a story with us. And it was something like, I don't remember what it was, 40 million people saw the show. It was a half-hour documentary. But we talked about adopting orphan cubs and other stuff. It went all over the world. Went all over the world. That stuff where you say, well, I don't want you out there, with a National Geographic for 2 weeks. I mean, you got other things to do. You got reports to write. You know what? If I can talk to 40 million people, I'll do that work in my sleep. Hal Korber, where you at, Hal? Yes. Hal Korber is one of the nicest people in the world. We spent 2 years together laughing and just doing the best we could to make this production. Hal is a genius with a camera. And I really like getting the credit for it, Hal. But it was something I cherished. One of the best experiences of my entire life. Because we were doing something that made a difference for the resorts. But it's not illegal to have fun while you do it. We had a lot of fun. On bear and on deer. We put a documentary together on bears. Hal did all the work. He had all the creativity. I take all the credit. Then here's a case where we're filming bears in Hemlock Farms Development. And a mother and two cubs are up here, eating garbage on the second floor. And we come driving by early in the morning. We look up and say, oh my God, we got to get this. This would be great for video. Hal jumps out and runs around the building, picks up his camera, and he's filming this. She goes down the stairs. Two little cubs go right down behind. It was hilarious. They went around the corner of the house. We were giggling and laughing like two little kids. Like, yes, that's a great scene. We walk around the corner. What do we see? They're getting into my truck. Like, and at least the mother was getting in on the driver's side. That was encouraging. I had some cookies in a lunch from the day before. In the back of this, the bear went up over and went back and grabbed my cookies and left. So let's switch gears here from bear to deer. And I've already talked about some of this, with deer management. This state has such enormous potential. The greatest experiences in my life have been hunting deer. And did I want the deer job? Absolutely not. But when I saw the possibility, and when we all sat together and they said, we will give you unprecedented immunity from politics, from whether it be internal or external, you have a problem, we need to solve this problem. It becomes a priority. That's a dream. And it's really rare because we might lose green certification on state forest system. That's his worry. Mine is this is an opportunity once in a lifetime, probably less. And so we sat around and talked about this. And when they decided that I could do that, I could pick my own team, have immunity. And they really upset a lot of people, as you might imagine. I don't blame them for being upset. They give him the nickname Czar. He's the deer czar. He's a bear biologist, now he's a deer czar. And I don't care. So we started looking at this, and we sat at a table, and it wasn't even in here. We went to hunting cabins. We went places where we were totally alone. And my comment to them, wherever we went, was, we walk through this door, nobody is higher than anybody else. We are all equal. Several of them worked for me. They said, it makes no difference. I don't care what you say. I want you to puke this up from the bottom of your soul. You tell me what you believe in, and let's argue about it. Let's find out. You tell me what. Then Dwayne would be quiet, wouldn't say much, and then he would just gut you out from one end to the other, saying, "Excuse me, but not really." But it was amazing. And what I'm telling you is, this is 50 years. I've looked at this. That's the highlight of my career. To sit in a room with like-minded people, all of us having the chance of a lifetime to make a difference in Pennsylvania. This isn't a game. This is real. My comment to them was, I want you to tell me if your life depended on it, if you would die if you got it wrong. Tell me what you believe we should do. And don't even spend 1 second thinking about how much it costs or politics. Yes, we're all going to die, but it's going to be fun. And the first year through, when we were setting up for Seasons of Bag Limits for January, I think Dwayne would agree with this. I think it felt more like a academic exercise. This isn't going to happen. Are you crazy? This stuff is nuts. And Joe Kosick, the historian of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, looked at me like I had two heads. They're like, you crazy? You can't get that through. Nobody's going to pass this stuff. But then when we sat down and we went through it the first year, and we made our recommendations, and almost every single thing we asked for became the policy for 2000. And that's when the entire team said, oh my God, we're flying a real plane. We better put it on the runway. And so then the next year, some of the team members became a whole lot more aggressive because they realized what I say matters. And they did more research, they dug in, they really drove their points home, and we had very heated discussions. When it was over, we never made an enemy that I know about, and we walked out. We just kept meeting and doing that. And then we made our proposals for Seasons of Bag Limits for January. And virtually every one of them went through. And then antlers restrictions came. That was a fight. That was a fight. And on the day antler restrictions passed, I was sitting in Raleigh's chair right there. And every time a commissioner said yay or nay, it was from the bottom of their heart. Either it was the worst thing you could ever imagine, or it was the greatest thing that could ever happen. There were 7 commissioners. And they started at this end and came down. And it was like, yay, nay, yay, nay, yay, nay. There was only one left. We had a complement of 8, but one was absent. And 3-3. 3-3. And I was just ready to scream. I was ready to explode. And the last person, I said, oh my God, we're going to lose it. He won't, I can't imagine him having the courage to go after something this hot. He stood up and said, he said, I just believe this is the right thing to do, and they lost it. We won. The audience lost it. When that person voted, everybody in the room knew we just got antler restrictions. And everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of the people in that room certainly wanted it. When they did that, the president's banging the gavel trying to get order in the room in here, and it took 5 minutes, and then they just took a half-hour break. But my point is this, is that don't forget to dream. Just because we've been defeated over and over and over doesn't mean we always have to be defeated. And it starts inside the organization. It's like how you treat your employees. And if you have employees who get out on the limit, it's really annoying. As an administrator, I'm sure it is. I have upset a lot of people. I didn't want to, but I did. You know how I got hired by the Game Commission? The legislature forced them to hire me. You know why? Because I'm not a veteran. It was 1977. I was a bear biologist. Went down and met with the executive director, the deputy director, and the head of research. And they would meet with me because I was wrapping up a 3-year bear study. I'd done lectures all over the state. And I said, I'm going to be leaving soon. I'd like to have a word with you if I could to try and fill you in on what we think is the most important things that needs to happen for the management of bears. And before I leave, I'd like to have a chance to talk with you. So I went down and I talked with them. And when I got done, of course, I learned this from the man from Western Electric. I didn't wear a suit, but I said to them, gave them all the information. And I said, my dream would be to work for the Pennsylvania Game Commission. And I said, it's just exactly what I would want to do. And I've been doing this for 3 years. You don't have anybody in the agency who's done this. And this is getting risky because the numbers of bear hunters are rising rapidly. We had around 250,000 bear hunters in 1976, but we only had 3,000 bears. Big difference. Now you get 20,000. You could have 250,000 now. It doesn't matter. They're over a much bigger area. These were concentrated in local areas. We're seeing, in 1976, when I met with the 3 highest people in the agency with regard, well, not really, not the deputy director, but, head of research, deputy, and the director. And I said, we always run the risk of having a serious overharvest. We've had a few in the 60s, and these aren't mice. These guys have slower reproductive rate. We need to try and nip this before it gets out of hand. And I would love to work for you. And the executive director, who didn't like me very much, he had a lot of reasons for that, but anyway, he said, "Are you a veteran?" I said, "No, sir, I'm not." And he said, he turned around and looked at me and he says, "We couldn't hire you even if we wanted to." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, thank you for your candidness." And then I went home and said, that didn't work too well. And then 3 weeks later, we had a bear season. It was on November 22nd, 1976, and we shot about a third of the bear population in less than 12 hours. And it got really hot quick. And so the anti-hunters were trying to take us to court. The hunters were very upset. Legislators were upset, like, what's going on? What did I do? I did what I always did. I just hit the road. I was doing lectures everywhere, explaining what was going on and why something had to be done to try and control this. And so one night, I was in Allentown, and I had 400 people in the audience. When I got done, this guy walked up to me and shook my hand. And he said, "Hi." He said, "Would you be willing to speak to the Fish and Game Committee and the House of Representatives?" I'm like, "Oh, there is a God." And I said, "Sure." So I went in and spoke at that meeting, and was, pretty direct. And they said at the end of the meeting, would you be willing to take us out, show us bears, and show us how to, tell us what you recommend that we do? And said, sure. So I did. I caught 5 bears the day they were there. And then at the evening, I did my presentation. At the end of the evening, the chairman came up to me and said, would you work for the Pennsylvania Game Commission if they ask you? And I said, well, I would, but I said, they can't. Did you ever tell the chairman of the Fish and Game Committee something that they can't do? That was even better than the Western Electric guy. So he said, they will hire you. And within 30 days, I was working for the commission. And I was the most hated person in the Pennsylvania Game Commission, probably. I don't care. Because I wasn't a veteran. How am I going to get a job? And most importantly, I could have the job of my dreams, and that's what happened. That's how I got into the Game Commission. And throughout my career, I have had so many opportunities to do so many things. I'm really grateful for it. And, yeah, I think this is my cue to get out, I think. Yeah, we need to move, yeah. So, anyway, thank you so much for coming. It's really been a pleasure. I hope that all of you get home safely. And I hope that those of you who are commissioners, I hope that you heard some of this, and I hope that you could take it into consideration, because I think it makes a difference to the employees. I stood here. We used to have the podium here. And I did a presentation, and the board was up here. And it was, I really laid into the issues and everything. When it was done, was a woman in the back came out, and she walked down here when it was over, and she said to me, I'm just a secretary. But she said, when you speak, it makes me proud to work for the Game Commission. That's all I needed to know.